Get in, nerds. We are playing Burden of Command. So, victory status determined by scripted events. So I think this one might not really be a scenario. It might just be like a walk in the park. So let's take a look at this battered chalet. Move out with Thompson.
Come on, man.
Oh, our labels went away. I feel like that wasn't supposed to happen. Too bad indeed. The Goering Chalet. Seen through your binoculars, Goering's house is an elegant ruin. The walls marked by shattered windows and half-hearted attempts at demolition. Toothpicks of timbers are strewn about the green grass. The remnant of a rustic roof retains rocks in the shingles, no doubt to help with the hard winters. You hear the Larmies. I hear the Limeys called Goering Herr Meyer sometimes, First Sergeant Grant says, as you both survey the bomb-brushed structure. Apparently the field marshal once claimed that no enemy bomber could reach the Ruhr, and if one did, then everyone would call him Meyer. Wonder if he goes by the name now. At least you'll know how to address Goering if you run into him. Well, that's exciting.
What goes around comes around.
Alright, that's Thompson. We'll do Dearborn next. We'll send him up this way. Might actually be useful to get Stern. We'll bolster to get him some extra distance. We'll throw him into this house, I think. Give nice coverage of this area.
Is that a gunshot?
Yeah, I don't think so, buddy. A messenger. PFC Dowdy arrives from the weapons platoon. Captain, we just captured a shepherd herding a flock of sheep. Lieutenant Stern is suspicious, given that the sheep have been sheared very early this year, if that matters. Well, this is the place for a flock, and oh, it matters. I'm gonna go with the third one. I don't know what that means. The messenger stares at you for a long moment. So, what should we do with him? We could ask where the wool's at, but not everybody who works or lives here has to be a serious Nazi, First Sergeant Grant notes, so there's that. That's a point. Usually you just let civvies be and move on, but here is kind of different. He may become our prisoner. Interrogate him. Detain him, release him. The shepherd will be briefly detained. Release him. The shepherd will be allowed to go. Maybe he'll be our guide. He may become our prisoner. Maybe he'll be our guide. You send the messenger back with the orders. When the man is gone, Grant looks your way with a questioning eyebrow. Local guide? He asks. I mean, he probably knows his way around, but would he really let his flock go? Before long, a whole flock of close-sheared sheep are guided toward the white woolly wave. Are guided forward in a white woolly wave. The shepherd behind them is an old man in older clothes. A brown wool vest as heavy as his big gray boots with leg wraps. His crooked staff is found nestled in Dowdy's arms alongside an M1. I almost have to wonder what century we're in, First Sergeant Grant asks you. Middle of the 20th, last time I checked. Bring him over, let the shepherd be. Middle of the 20th, last time I checked. Okay, we're on the same page then, First Sergeant Grant says. $5 says his first name is Hans. $5 it is? That's a sucker's bet. $5 it is. I'll bring him up, First Sergeant Grant says, and steps forward to do just that. Up close, the shepherd's worry lines deepen. Blue eyes dart over your gear and linger upon the carbine. His own clothing shows many a repair, the stitching keeping worn cloth in place. Guten Morgen, he says, hesitantly. Ask his name, there's a bet to resolve. What's he doing out here? Ask if he's a Nazi. Ask more specific questions. Decide if he'll make a good guide. Ask his name. There's a bet to resolve. Jurgen Schaefer, he says. Beside you, Grant passes you the $5 you just won. Naturally, the shepherd raises a subtle eyebrow at the exchange. Ask if he's a Nazi. 9, Jurgen says, then repeats it more forcefully. 9. They never are, never were, First Sergeant Grant says, especially not now. They never are, never were, First Sergeant Grant says, especially not now. What's he doing out here? Jurgen waves a hand toward the sheep, who, predictably, have spread out and begun to chew on the thick, dewy grass. Ask more specific questions. With the basics out of the way, you consider the more pressing questions. Ask about local forces. So we can ask about Hitler's house, ask about Goering, ask about local forces. What'll he do if released? Decide if he'll make a good guide. Ask about local forces. Jurgen shakes his head and talks through the translator. Not many. Those with the car have fled. There might be a few in the forests, but no one wants to fight. For years they've told us of victory after victory. Then they told us of wonder weapons that would turn the tide. Now at the end there are no more illusions. We've lost. Glad someone here knows that, First Sergeant Grant says, and it only took nearly 6 years this time. What'll he do if released? Jurgen almost smiles as he talks to the translator. He says, I'll tend my flock in these pastures for a time. Then tend them in the high pastures when the grass is ripe. In the autumn, I will head down the mountain with them. And then the winter comes in the lower valley. When the spring comes again, I will shear them once more and sell the wool. He's got it all planned out, First Sergeant Grant says. I'm kind of jealous. Ask about Hitler's house. Jurgen draws in a deep breath and sighs. The translation is a lengthy one. Yes, he has an estate here. Likes it very much. He has many beautiful dogs. I have orders to keep the sheep from them. He, the Fuhrer, once sent me a bottle of beer, still cold, from his cellar. He said he liked to watch me tend my sheep upon the slopes when evening fell. Makes sense in a way, First Sergeant Grant remarks. Man sets the world on fire and enjoys a happy sunset. Ask about Goering. Jurgen shrugs and talks through the translator. The big man in white. Left many dogs here, but they are hungry and only for meat. But perhaps his nephew will come, or his brother. I much prefer his brother. Many years ago, Albert spoke with me about my flock one evening. We shared a pickle right down the middle. Goering had a brother? First Sergeant Grant asks. Since no one has an answer, he lets the questions drop. Decide if he'll make a good guide. Just a shepherd, Captain, First Sergeant Grant says. Politics doesn't seem to be a part of him. That's certainly debatable, but it may not be your debate. Jurgen is German and almost certainly a Nazi, even if you won't admit it now. Merely living in Bergtesgaten is proof of that. However, he's also far more interested in his flock than anything else. He'll be our prisoner. Detain and release him. He'll be our prisoner. Arrest him. Detain and release. The shepherd will be briefly detained. Release him. The shepherd will be allowed to go. Ask him to be a guide. The shepherd will be briefly detained. You give the order. The man is detained until your men move past. Afterward, Grant looks your way. Treating him like the Volkssturm, he remarks, just like a bunch of other Nazis. I mean, we don't know who he really is, but what the hell? He can't be that terrible. Cool. Oh right, this squad is borked. All right, so that's all there is with Stern. All right, and then it's gonna be Dearborn coming up next. I don't know that there's another side in this quote-unquote battle. We'll just head up here. Ready, we sure are. Let's not fuck this up again. Indeed. Oh, nothing in this house. Interesting. Right, let's head up the road. The greenhouse. Sunlight glitters off the ruined glass of the greenhouse. Its panes have been shattered by the shock of bomb blasts. Only the frame and the green plants remain inside, intact. Bormann's house. That's Martin Bormann, I think. Famously a horse. Hearts of Iron 4 nerds will understand. It was like a party secretary or something. Did a lot of work behind the scenes. This unlucky house took a direct hit. All that's left are charred timbers and bits of tile tumbling down a half-collapsed roof. Whoever lived here must have been pretty high up in the Nazi pecking order, given the place lies between Hitler's Berghof and Goering's chalet. Could have gotten more distance with another bolster. We'll send Rao towards this building. I think we can make the distance.
This is the way! March now!
Actually, we'll send Rao down this way. And us by ourselves. Weary. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? We'll head up this way. All right. And that is the turn. I'll probably do the Bergtesgaten as its own, as one entire scenario. I don't think there's that much. All right, so yes, we got this shattered house. We got the military roadblock. So let's send Lieutenant Thompson up this way to take a look at this business.
Hotel, barracks, or house?
Okay, so we only go there if we... Alright, so no event for this one. We'll give him a bolster, get him a little extra distance.
Keep going, Koenig!
Yeah, Koenig. Get it together, Koenig.
Quick time!
Ich kann Sie nicht sehen. Wo sind Sie?
Ausweis, bitte. Your men approach an obvious security checkpoint, a civilian checkpoint. Even a light tank could readily breach the barrier they have out front, but there isn't even the need for that. The door to the place swings slightly in the wind, and not a soul is to be seen. Cool. Alright, and we'll go for this house last. Singing along. Someone begins singing in the distance. An American, a tenor too, a good one. His rendition of Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree carries far in this air. That's Corporal Henry, First Sergeant Grant says. I'd recognize his voice anywhere. It doesn't take long before you find the corporal astride the road barrier near the gatehouse, belting out tunes with a bottle in hand. His wife wants to leave him for a colonel. Listen, figure out what to do about the singing corporal. His wife wants to leave him for a colonel. Yeah, they married before he shipped out, First Sergeant Grant notes, back in 42. You certainly remember the letters, the last one especially. She's filed for divorce, but he's definitely out of the country. Listen. The verses of the song begin to get mangled as words slur a bit. Guess he scrounged up a bottle, First Sergeant Grant says. It won't be the last either. This might be the land for schnapps, but Germans like for sheep, but Germans like their beer or schnapps. Where there's alcohol, a soldier will find it. Figure out what to do about the singing corporal. As usual, your men want to do what they want. He's not hurting anyone. Corporal Henry will keep singing and drinking. Force him back to his squad. Return to the service. Very low chance of later problems. Post a few other singers up there. Corporal Henry may become subdued. Low chance of prestige -2. We'll write up a report later. Corporal Henry will be left alone. High chance of deflecting any blame. Make an example of him. Will be arrested and manacled. Low chance of trust -20. Force him back to his squad. Mm, do I really care? I have to report later. I'll take a very low chance of later problems. Go back to your squad, Henry. You detail Grant to return Henry to his squad. They can look after the drunkard.
That's just what we want. I'm worried now.
Alright, that's Thompson. We'll send Rao out this way.
Harden yourselves!
Something ain't right.
Hitler's Berghof has taken a licking. Most of the windows, including the big ones from the newsreels, have been blown out. You can smell the cinder that chewed on the timbers, and wisps of smoke still rise from the smoldering char. Now there's a fucking metaphor for Sergeant Grant notes.
Purchased by hate.
That's the way of it.
Eins, zwei.
Just thought I'd wander him around a bit. I think we'll take Dearborn up this way, because I don't know that we've procced the event for this location yet.
That's a pity. Sad, but predictable.
Smokes. Alright. So that's Dearborn. We'll bring Stern up next. Nothing too complicated here. Shots fired. Shots ring out. 1, 2, 3, all from an American rifle. What the hell's shooting? First Sergeant Grant asks, and dispatches runner to find out. Thought we'd secured that checkpoint. The corporal returns a little while later. Corporal Henry shot up a bunch of sheep before the others tackled him. He's well past drunk and under guard now. Just sheep, First Sergeant says. Grant says, thank God. You pay the kraut and feast tonight. Dang. Oh well.
Ruined. Good.
I risked the event, and the event happened as expected. Alright. Let's head on in. Oh, right, because it's Stern's go-round. Gotta swap back to Dearborn. Get a little bit more distance, and we'll head into the building. When Stern said SS Barracks, you expected to find a simple square of buildings. Here there's nothing of the kind. 4 large buildings lay split open, like logs under an axe, their inner ends sprawled across the central parade ground. Pieces of fine plate and tile lie scattered across the packed earth, and a plaque with the words SS Kaserne rests, partially embedded in the looser soil nearby. Your headquarters section, augmented by First Squad, creeps forward from cover to cover as they prepare to secure the position. A flash of movement catches your eye as a figure darts from a portion of not quite collapsed corner. The cloth is a familiar gray. Morris fires off a round, the cracking of his rifle shattering the stillness of the day. First Squad joins in, peppering the concrete with pockmarks. Order ceasefire before anyone gets hurt. Advance idealism, combat fatigue 20, realism +2. Use my carbine to help. Advance zeal, combat fatigue 10, realism +1. Redeploy the men for maximum effect, combat fatigue -10. Order ceasefire. This could be someone important, combat fatigue -10. Order them to ceasefire. I'm in command here. Advanced discipline, combat fatigue +20, realism +2. Order cease fire. This could be someone important. Maximum professionalism previously attained. Combat fatigue -10. You order the men to hold their fire. With a bit of coaxing, a fleeing German yields to the obvious peril of the situation and scurries over. In his hands rest a bevy of tin cans, each mark bearing a distinctive SS mark. Hell of a way to end a war. The men, major victory, very light casualties. The mission, major victory. Bergtesgaten secured. No one out of action, sir. We'll continue with the story until the Age of Men screen.
But anyway, I remember 7 of us standing there, and the old man gave us that badge, pinned it on us, and I remember, never will forget the words. He said, "Soldier, you'll surely go to heaven because you've spent your time in hell."
It's all over except for the shouting. Victory in Europe. This day will certainly make the papers. Mission major victory. Secured the SS complex, Hitler's Berghof and Goering's mansion, the guardhouse, the roads, and other locales. Men, major victory. Your soldiers have survived. Nickel Company takes up positions and awaits further orders amid the rolling green slopes and grand mansions of the Bergtesgaten. The men chatter eagerly about visiting places they'd only ever seen in a newsreel. Just a few years ago, this would have been an impossible thought. But there's still work to be done. Thompson has taken 1st Platoon toward the ruined chalet. He mentioned a Nazi flag fluttering on a pole. It's not there anymore, that's for sure. Rao has moved 2nd Platoon into that ruined chalet. He gave no reason, but you imagine he has one. Dearborn has 3rd Platoon deployed as sentries, just in case the Germans decide to be brave again. Stern has moved his men to Hitler's Berghof. No doubt he's there setting up his mortars. I'm gonna head over to Rao first. Thick carpet and fancy furniture adorn the interior of what you recognize must be Goering's chalet. The walls all but sag under the weight of 100 magnificent paints and lush tapestries, and everything that can conceivably be trimmed with gold or fur is. 2nd Platoon is taking it easy in the Reichsmarschall de Großdeutschen's kitchen, opening tins or emptying, among other things, a massive jar of pickles. They joke and laugh readily, their guard down for once. So, I'm trying to find something in my notes here. There's a guy, Stryker, one of the top Nazis. I don't know if it's his place here that we're referring to, but I know that he was one of the top Nazis, and when his house was emptied out, was taken, Americans, the American forces just found mountains and mountains of pornography. It's one of those baffling things. Anyway, you find Lieutenant Rao in an opulent sitting room, boots off and seated in upon a high-backed chair, his heels digging a wolfskin rug as he pages slowly through a leather-bound photo album. Goering was quite the shutterbug. Clear my throat. Goering was quite the shutterbug. He does enjoy being seen, Rao remarks as he looks up at you. Then he motions to the high-backed seat opposite him. I wish I had someone to call for coffee or tea, Captain, but alas, there are no servants here. He is making an effort to relax. Rao will gain realism +1. If he does come undone, he may never get laced back up. Rao may get realism +3. I'm going to do the first one. He's making an effort to relax. You gesture at the photo album. Beneath the leather covering in gold leaf, there are a bevy of black and white photographs. One of them is clearly labeled 1918. Ah, yes. Goering's photographs, Rao says. He commanded the Flying Circus in 1918, and many claimed he was a hero. The Flying Circus, by the way, so for those of you in the audience, is Yasta 11. He didn't take over directly for the Red Baron, but the famous Red Baron of World War I fame, Manfred von Richthofen, but he did eventually take over that squadron. Anyway, back to Rao. I understand now that he was merely doing his job, a job with the expectations of a reward. After the war, he joined the Nazis early on. He was rewarded for that too. I read about him for years afterward. Boys cheer what men regret. Raoul will gain realism. America forgives a great deal in her immigrants. Raoul will gain realism. There will be time for coffee, tea, and long talks. Raoul will gain realism. Germany has its heroes. America will too. Raoul will gain realism. Rewards are best on the winning side. Raoul will gain realism. Boys cheer what men regret. America forgives a great deal of her immigrants. There'll be time for coffee, tea, and long walks. Germany has its heroes. America will too. Rewards are best on the winning side. Boys will cheer what men regret. I do so have my regrets, Rao considers. Rao's realism +1. He proves unwilling to engage in further conversation, and eventually you leave the man there with the photo album open before him. Checking on Thompson. Back behind the ruined chalet, you find Thompson and the members of 1st Platoon gathered around the base of a flagpole as they haul down the swastika that once flew at its top. When it reaches the men, a scuffle breaks out as a dozen hands try to take it as a prize. Easy now, Thompson calls to them and calms them down. It's only fair that we split this up so everyone gets an equal share. Okay, who's got a knife? Half a dozen varied blades, from looted Italian fascist daggers to a French carving knife, suddenly appear in generous hands. Thompson elects a sturdy American bayonet and starts cutting the enemy's flag into even pieces. Let me have a second one for Patterson's parents, will you? Morris asks. Thompson mollifies the man with a simple nod. I'm going to wait for him to finish. 3 pieces in, Thompson notices your presence. Hold on a minute, Captain, he says, and hands the knife to Crossley. The big sergeant readily continues the work. That flag wasn't doing anything like it was. I figured it'd make a good souvenir, a reminder of what we went through to get it. Thompson says, once the two of you are away from the assembly. At least that's my thinking. You could use a pep talk, he'll gain realism +1. He's thinking of home, better settle him down. May gain realism +3. I'll do the second one. You begin to talk. Thompson is quiet as you remind him of his duty. When you finish up, he sighs. I get you, Thompson says. No letting up. This war hurt a lot of people. Wish the politicians found a way around this early on. I mean, we tried hard. Ah, gosh darn, you know what I mean. So this is may increase in realism. Okay, so it's the same options. So they're all the same as each other. Just as you know, there could be guerrilla action. We're soldiers until we muster out. Be practical, that's all I ask. These days it's either sweat or blood. That wasn't a great campaign slogan. Be practical, that's all I ask. Of course, Captain, Thompson replies and manages a smile. Pragmatism is very pragmatic. Thompson's realism +3. With that, he strides back to his platoon, whistling. We'll meet up with... We'll find Stern. You step into Hitler's cavernous great hall to find Stern at the dictator's chair, his carbine halfway across the table and a bottle of champagne in his hand. He pauses in mid-sip as he notices you. I thought you'd come, he says, and idly tugs at his uniform. The scorched threads of the cuffs and the sweat-wrinkled sleeves are at odds with the luxurious chairs and polished table. He gestures offhandedly toward a phone tucked in beside the barren fireplace. The edges of the receiver are polished to a golden sheen. I was just about to make a call and end the war. Don't let me stop you, peer at the champagne bottle. Don't let me stop you. I wasn't planning on it. No, sorry, this is Stern. I'm doing the wrong accent. I wasn't planning on it, Stern replies with a chuckle. You know, I dreamed about this place. Here I am sitting in Hitler's house and drinking his terribly sweet champagne. When he really unwinds, he may snap. Stern will gain realism +1, or he's secretly reveling in this, but it won't last. Stern may gain realism +3. If Stern's realistic enough, he'll gain realism +1. You take a seat beside the man and let him pour you a drink from the blue-tinted bottle. As he'd said, the stuff is sweet enough to run a chocolate shop. He said Hitler was a teetotaler and a vegetarian. Well, the butcher's block may not have seen use, but the wine cellar sure has. Before you ask, I'm drunk. Not yet, anyway. Stern explains, I couldn't order around the men if I really let loose. All I really want now is... He trails off, uncertain of what to say. So this is Stern will gain realism. Some R&R back home? Don't ruin your record today. We aren't finished yet. I need you ready for whatever comes. The army will keep you busy. The army will keep you busy. I don't need to be busy, Stern replies. I just need to not be anything. Stern's realism +1. With a single sharp motion, he hurls the half-full bottle across the room, showering the bust of some Prussian king or other with shards of glass and a shower of rich champagne. But he's not drinking, and that's about all you can ask of him right now. Okay, well, wasn't ideal. Stern's had a hard war. I know that. Meet up with Dearborn. 3rd Platoon has been deployed in a loose perimeter, enough to give warning if need be. The failures of 2nd Battalion at Utweiler will not be repeated. Utweiler. Utweiler. Oh, right. Utweiler was a scenario that was available in the demo, but wasn't part of the campaign. 2nd Battalion, that's not our battalion. Or maybe it's our battalion, but I don't think it's the way it's said here is not. Anyway, Lieutenant Dearborn's command post rests amid a knot of trees whose thick roots offer ready cover. The man himself smokes steadily through a pack of camels, a little mound of spent ashes accumulating before him, as he stares up at the nearby mountain, contemplating the peaks between puffs. What do you see, Dearborn? Stone and salt, Dearborn remarks. The region is famous for both. Other than that, this region has nothing to offer it, save its geography, which is the reason why the French and Habsburg monarchies have fought over it for centuries. I have written a few small passages to that effect. He lightly taps a leather-bound book at his side. The cover untitled, its pages crisp. He's been worn down. Century-old history is a poor match for modern war. Same choices for the others. I'm going to risk him getting 3 realism, maybe. Dearborn listens intently as you lay out your worries about concerning the Cottonbalers' reputation. The men will follow where they are led, he notes. We are expected to comport ourselves well. I have instructed my sergeants to help the men avoid that temptation. We shall endeavor to steer clear where riders are concerned. Let's remain vigilant. Just make the reports look good. I hope we can look on the bright side here. The army has bigger plans for us. We must do all we can. We must do all we can. No stopping or dawdling, Dearborn replies and tenders over a nod. Our luck must run out eventually, but not this day. With that, Dearborn resumes his lonely vigil with a book in hand. Gather the unit for a quick celebration. Have a talk with First Squad. I'm going to have a talk with First Squad. First Squad has taken up positions in the shadow of the ruined greenhouse, though the lure of fresh vegetables seems to have overcome some of their native caution. Only Morris is on sentry, his back to the others, as Roberts goes digging and Crosley examines some of the discarded impediments. See what Roberts is digging up? Ease over to Morris, leave them be. See what Roberts is digging up. Rich black earth dribbles from between PFC Roberts' fingers as he extracts a fist-sized turnip from beneath the surface. With a practiced eye, he studies the exterior, a royal purple up top and a pale white below. Tonight's frost might have killed it, Captain, PFC Roberts says as he notes your approach. On one weathered finger, his wedding ring gleams in the sunlight, but luckily we got here first. That's Hitler's turnip. Maybe the frost should have killed it. Would have thought you'd be writing to your wife. What are your plans for after the war? Carry on. What are your plans for after the war? To go home and be with my wife, Roberts says, and prods the soil with his toe. Wish I could take the soil here, but there's glass in it and too much to carry besides. What about staying in the army? There's talk about sending soldiers to college. The world needs farmers more than ever. Sounds like you know what you want. There's talk about sending soldiers to college. College? Robert asks. Never did much for books. Farmer's Almanac, of course, but well, maybe there's something for me to learn. Sergeant Grant always said I should be outstanding in my field. You have plans for that turnip? Have you written your wife yet? You must be expecting something back home. Carry on. You written your wife yet? Not yet, Captain. Robert says, day's not over and it's getting real interesting. Should I write you back enough? But you spent a lot on paper. Worth the trouble? Worth the trouble? No trouble at all, Robert says. Writing her, well, calms me down better than a pack of cigarettes and a cup of coffee. You have any plans for that turnip? Yes, Captain, Roberts replies. Nothing big, though, just taking it home. Got a couple friends that might admire it. So my options are not worried about eating something bad, sure, turnips or turnip, or nod. I'm gonna nod. Sometimes you gotta steal Hitler's produce. I get it. That's a vibe. You must be expecting something more back home. Well, not getting shot at anymore is what I'm really looking forward to, Robert says and gives a shrug. But I figured everyone knew that. The world needs farmers more than ever. Always does, always will, Captain, Robert says. The cities keep getting bigger and everyone needs to eat. All to my part, like my father did. You gonna do anything with all your letters? Roberts considers for a long moment. Keep them in the attic, I suppose. After this is all over, I won't need them much around anymore. Carry on. Yes, Captain, Robert says, and goes in search of another vegetable to bring home. He's over to Morris. You make your way over to the man. Yeah, Captain? Morris asks, never taking his gaze from the hillside. Just wanted to see how you were doing. What are your plans for all this? That'll be all. Just wanted to see how you were doing. I'm fine, Morris says as he glances over at you. I wish James was here. This is the end and he deserved to see it. James should have been here. You're gonna have to let him go. I wish things had been different. I wish things had been different. Me too, Things are always easier with him around, Morris says quietly. What are your plans for after all this? Don't know yet, Captain, Morris replies. If you were my old captain, I'd have a better answer, but you aren't and I don't. Well, you'll always have a home in the army. True, Morris replies. Nothing else. We've got a little rank and know how things work. That'll be... Oh, okay, interesting. So if we say that, that's the end of the conversation. Morris offers over a nod and returns to his vigil. Leave them be. You leave first squad, first platoon, your men from the beginning. You leave first squad, first platoon, your men from the beginning to their thoughts and dreams. A long road, but you're almost at the end. Gather the unit for a quick celebration. In the end, there can only be one fitting place for this gathering, the front of the Berghof, Hitler's own front porch. The men make a good effort to clean up the patio, brushing out the smaller rocks and digging a bevy of white chairs into the open air. There aren't many glasses around, but then your veterans are willing to drink right from the bottle. Your officers are on their way. 2 of them have fought all the way from the shores of Morocco. Your own service includes 3 major invasions, the Rhine, countless river crossings, and mountain assaults. That has left its mark on you all, and yet you still recognize these men, able officers of Nickel Company. Rao replaced Wilson after that Italian trickery in Palma di Montichiaro, but it took a while for him to really fit in. Observe the men proudly for a time. Extended scene. Prepare the toast. Skip scene. Observe the men proudly for a time. You hang back and watch, glad to be able to enjoy these calm moments at last. Thompson is already there, talking with Private Roberts about a letter. Each man has a piece of that Nazi flag tucked into a breast pocket, a proud talisman of a defeated enemy. Stern saunters inside. Thompson steps over and offers him part of the torn-up Nazi flag. Stern accepts the token and shakes Thompson's hand gladly before they part. One private levers open a tin of crackers. Another cracks open a jar of pickles, then skewers one with his bayonet. He offers the piece of dill to anybody who passes near. Dearborn strides into the mix, followed by Rao precisely 1 pace to the left and behind. Though the climate is a trifle warmer than you might like, Dearborn is saying, it is far superior to the seasons in Georgia, save only in Savannah. Ah, it's the destination of Sherman's march, Rao replies. They said he spared it. To present as a Christmas gift to President Lincoln, Dearborn adds. Extravagant, Rao says and sniffs the air. I smell cognac. A very special cognac. Continue to observe, prepare the toast. I'm going to continue to observe. You spot Sergeant Crosley as he steps before Lieutenant Rao and offers over a crisp salute. The two men started talking in earnest ever since Crosley got put in for a battlefield commission. Thompson steps over to Dearborn before the other man can more than savor a sniff from the bottle of cognac. A dog-eared book is set on the table. Dearborn scoops up the tome and slips it into the pocket, never turning his attention from the spirits. Morris sits on a nearby stone bench. He stares into the sunset and sips from a whiskey bottle while another identical bottle rests untouched but open beside him. Rao offers Stern a bottle of beer and says something in Yiddish. Stern stares at him suspiciously. Then he replies in English with a deliberate German accent. Always enjoy life. You'll be dead longer than you're alive. There's a pause, then Rao lets out an odd little laugh. Stern looks at the bottle for a moment, then takes a swig. Within moments, the two are passing the bottle back and forth, chatting like old friends. Several of the enlisted men compare the lengths of their makeshift hiking poles. Each says his is a little longer than any other. I'm going to watch for a few final moments. At the table at the back, you find Corporal Sobieski putting pen to paper while Private Roberts gives him pointers on grammar. Apparently the corporal's writing a letter home, but this time he is doing so on Hitler's stationery with the Fuhrer's ink. Thompson offers a drink to Rao, an offer that is accepted and imbibed with a solemn ceremony. The two shake hands and part afterward. Rao glances your way and taps his watch. The men begin to sense the mood and settle in. Dearborn and Stern sit side by side like they were back on the Tasker H. Bliss, cruising through the night-swept sea off Morocco. Prepare the toast. Sergeant Grant reverently passes you the papers you had requested. It's been a long war. Many brave men have fallen. The record before you bears many names. You knew them all, seeing them listed together as a heavy weight on your chest. I miss Lieutenant Wilson, a veteran from 2nd Platoon calls out. Yeah, another answers. He was our old hand. After all the wars he fought in, you'd think God would have let him live out his days in peace. No one disagrees with that. The replacements nod along. The French killed Mike, PSC Roberts says morosely. I've forgiven them that, but I haven't forgotten. A lot of you didn't know Mike Hancock, but he was the first. And he was my best friend. What about Captain Boston, your XO asks. He wasn't a Cottonbaler, Sergeant Grant replies, but he was a brave man and a damn fine officer. There's a lot of mumbling about that, but the old veterans put a stop to it. Cordell Boston died at Anzio, fighting alongside you. A toast in his memory is the least he deserves. And Johnny Patterson, Morris says softly, glancing at the open bottle next to him. You deserve better. And of course there's Captain Lamb, First Sergeant Grant calls out. And also to Captain Lamb. Lieutenant Dearborn calls out. Never forget him, Stern says wistfully. He was the one who trained us first. Captain Lamb, the chaos of Morocco and everything that led up to that fateful day. The veterans start telling stories. There are plenty from First Sergeant Grant, Sparks, Crosley, Roberts, several corporals, Morris, and finally Sergeant Washington. When it's over, you raise a glass to all of them. The wine is bittersweet with memories and wistful sentiment as it goes down. The last day. The French arrive less than an hour later. Though they prove visibly disappointed at having been beaten to the Bergtesgaten, they seem good sports about it. Though they do insist on raising their flag alongside yours in a formal ceremony. The 101st, their lead elements still en route, will have to be satisfied with the second ceremony tomorrow. The men of Nickel Company prepare to salute where the American flag goes up the pole. The French flag offers a bit more trouble. There's a problem hoisting the tricolor. Offer to help, prestige +2. Which the nearest French officer, trust +15. Do nothing, it's a French affair. I'm going to offer to help. You summon two of your best flagmen. Before you can articulate the offer properly, a French officer, the tidily dressed Captain Pelletier, whom you last saw at the Siegfried line, intercepts. Bonsoir, Capitaine. Capitaine, he says, and offers over a simple nod. We meet once more. I'm glad of that. Too many have suffered to raise this flag. You understand, yes? You nod. Of course you understand. After all you've been through, it'd be hard not to. The French eventually sort things out, and the tricolor goes up the mast. May 6th, 0900 hours, road out of Bergtesgaten. You assemble the men for the walk out of town. The trucks are not around, but the men haven't forgotten the true Scott trot. They march proudly through the streets of Bergtesgaten. A knot of grungy, haggard men in olive green appear before them, their shoulders adorned with the screaming eagles of the 101st Airborne. Order my men to let the paras wander past. Trust -20, prestige -2. Keep walking, we have the right of way, prestige +1. Order a halt to sort things out. I did this a trap. I'm going to order a halt to sort things out. You give the order and bring your column up short. The paras continue their approach. We left you plenty to loot, Morris calls out. 2 pickles and a wild dog. One of the paras suddenly darts forward. He takes the nearest Cottonbaler down with a diving tackle. More paras spill into the street. Pandemonium erupts. It's a bare-knuckle brawl, and it erupts in the last place you expected. Try to break it up. Very low chance of trust -20. Wade in. Trust +10. High chance of prestige -2. Have Sparks radio the military police. Slight chance of prestige -2. Or fire my carbine into the air. Low chance of trust -2. Trust -20, rather. I'm going to try to break it up. A sharp word and a single blow begins to separate the two groups. A shot rings out. PFC Roberts lets out a yelp and lurches to one side. As he clutches his arm, blood drips from his fingers. He stares over at a paratrooper from the 101st, but the smoking Luger tucked into the man's belt. An accident. But then Roberts lets out a whoop of joy. You beautiful bastard, I could kiss you, he says and holds up his bloody arm. From what you can see, the bullet went right through the meat and nothing more. $1 million wound. I can't fight anymore. I'm going home. The medics come up. Sulfa and bandages follow. As the stretcher is prepared for Roberts, the wounded private looks to Morris. Hey, I want to take Georgie back with me. This is the first we've seen of Georgie in a long time. We had to leave that sorry ass back in France, poor guy, Morris says and sighs. And I don't know how you'd ship him back to the States anyway. You'd have to have some pull, be a captain at least, to swing that. Roberts looks at you hopefully. Fine, I'll write up the paperwork. Gain trust, test professionalism. Very low chance of prestige loss. Georgie will head to the States. Will you vouch for the character of that donkey? Gain a lot of trust, test professionalism. Very low chance of prestige loss. Georgie will head to the States. No, Private, that'd be stealing from the army. Georgie will remain in Europe. No, I know where that donkey's been. -5 trust, Georgie will remain in Europe. I'm going to do the second one. That one seems better. A lot of trust seems better than trust. Will you vouch for the character of that donkey? PFC Roberts gives a little chuckle. Yes, Captain. He was the best soldier in the outfit. Some of the other Cottonbalers take mock offense at that, but since Roberts is sporting that red badge, they don't dare retaliate full. You have Grant make a note to figure out the paperwork. Eventually, the medics arrive. We can list him as a gift from the French, First Sergeant Grant suggests. Georgie, I mean. They're prickly enough about it that no one will want to ask about it, and if they do, they like being generous with things they don't have. Trust +30. Let me read that again. They're prickly enough that no one will want to ask about it, and if they do, they like being generous with things they don't have. There you go. Got it that time. And that is the last maneuver of the Cottonbalers' war in Europe. You managed to get Nickel Company out of the Bergtesgaten with a few stern orders and a lot of yelling. You know that your duty is nearly complete. The only question is whether you and the 7th will be shipped out to the Pacific to invade Japan. The company returns to Salzburg and goes into garrison. 3 months later, Japan surrenders. The Second World War is over. You can sail home. Epilogue. The last war was fought by blunt men with crude tactics. This war deserves more. Options are the Captain's Epilogue, Officer Epilogue, Enlisted Soldier's Epilogue, Nickel Company's Epilogue. My journey is at an end the game. Thanks for playing. I'm just going to go through top to bottom. So we'll do the Captain's Epilogue first. I'm going to find out what becomes of Captain Murphy. We were the good guys and we won. Captain's made some investment in idealism. We pushed hard when called upon. Captain's made some investment in zeal. War requires deception, slaughter does not. Captain made an enormous investment in cunning. People, not armies, make decisions. Captain made an enormous investment in professionalism. I knew the things I couldn't order. Captain made a large investment in discipline. I'm going to choose the cunning option. War requires deception. Slaughter does not. Going forward boldly means facing machine guns at close range. There are better ways to die and better ways to make the enemy die instead. My expectations were met. After all this, I just want to go home. Strangely enough, I wanted an army career. The fight was over too soon. After all this, I just wanted to go home. Eventually, you were demobilized and sent back into the reserve once more. That return to civilian life as before was a tricky one. Your wife was waiting for you. So was the child you left behind, and to whom you were now a stranger. And so peacetime life resumed. I went to school on the GI Bill, idealism path. I eased into public service, zeal path. Of course, I pursued a law career, cunning path. Politics interested me, professionalism path. I returned to the army and sought to train officers, discipline path. This is interesting. A law career or a professionalism or politics. These are my two best ones. So I'm going to go with one of them. I'm going to pursue a career in law. That's the cunning path, and that's Captain Murphy for you. Laws formed the basis of society, and that meant a chance to do some real good in a myriad of subtle ways. A legal career consists of several parts. Education culminating in the Juris Doctorate, passing the bar exam, and establishing a practice. Naturally, you excelled at each of these. I like to think of Captain Murphy's run as a run that sort of has the rule of law at its core. Like I did my best to stay civilized in a barbaric context. The war became a hazy, benign memory unless you needed to remember. You and your wife settled into a satisfying routine, and together you raised a happy, gifted child. You'd done much for your country. An addendum to the official record appealed to you, if you could find the time. So take me back to the other epilogues. Reconsider my prior path. This lets me select other options. Personal details or final mindsets. Let's take a look at final. Let me take a look at this before we do this. Women with different plans. Plan to do a specific work for an employer, 40%. Full-time school, 8%. Own business, 7%. Operate farm, 6%. Stay in army, 3%. Interesting. Let's look at personal details. Verbosity 10. Why yes, talking is a great relief to me and the others who enjoy such endeavors. Directness 10. Direct. Sarcasm 10. Total asshole. Home front, wife and child. Expectations nothing. Why we fight, my duty. Perfect. I nailed it. A perfect 10 out of 10 in all categories. I achieved sarcasm 10 and verbosity 10. And that's a successful run for Captain Murphy. Let's take a look at final mindsets. Primary mindset, cunning, take advantage. Idealism 2, encouraging. Zeal 2, got things done. Cunning 5, cunning as a fox that teaches cunning. Professionalism 5, magnetic manager. Discipline 4, the Iron Captain. All right, let's head to the other epilogues. Officer epilogue. Returning, the 7th is a storied regiment. Officer epilogue. Okay, interesting. So these are the base 4. And I guess these are the 4 who can show up. And we only got Rao because we only suffered 1 officer casualty in the false flag ruse at Palma di Montichiaro. And then commanding officers. Alright, so let's check out Thompson, Wilson, Dearborn, and Stern. Lieutenant Thompson survived the war. Lieutenant Wilson was killed in combat. Lieutenant Dearborn survived the war. Lieutenant Stern survived the war. Wilson didn't survive the war. We'll do him first. Like many veterans, the war couldn't kill Lieutenant Wilson without a bit of treachery, so he was murdered under flag of truce by Italian blackshirts. Needless to say, his platoon unleashed their worst impulses in reprisal. Wilson would have understood why they'd done it. He might not have approved, but the Italians foolishly made sure he didn't have a say in the matter. Wilson would be reburied elsewhere in Europe, within the bounds of consecrated lands, behind a neat white fence, where rows upon rows of his fellow soldiers lay. Lieutenant Thompson's post-war years. Lieutenant Thompson survived the war. He resigned his commission in order to return to college and become a teacher. Teaching college-level courses to men and women not much younger than he was proved to be a challenge that he rose to accept. Hundreds of students passed through his classes and came to appreciate the quiet-spoken Vermont native. Whenever asked about his wartime experiences, he'd simply say that he carried the burden of command and served with heroes. Lieutenant Dearborn's post-war years. Lieutenant Dearborn survived the war. He rose quickly in rank after he obtained a slot in a company command in Japan. Battalion command was his in Korea, and finally a regiment in Germany. At the time of his retirement, he wore a general's stars. Upon returning to Edgehill, he took up his family's interests, and to this day the name Dearborn is a widely respected one in Virginia. Lieutenant Stern's post-war years. Lieutenant Stern survived the war. He stayed with the Army long enough to become a major before he mustered out. With a formidable background hand in hand, he dove into politics. Though he could be bellicose and rough at times, his audiences loved the dichotomy, and soon he would be elected to a series of higher and higher offices for decades to come. Alright, let's go to the other officers. Camara, Rao, Turney, and Glasgow. I only got Rao, so we'll see what's going on with the others. Lieutenant Camara survived the war. Lieutenant Rao survived the war. Lieutenant Glasgow survived the war. I'm gonna not do Lieutenant Camara and Lieutenant Glasgow. If you want to see them, play Burden of Command and get some of your lads killed. Lieutenant Rao's post-war years. Lieutenant Rao somehow survived the war. He considered what should come next. The answer was an easy one. He applied himself to a series of commands during the occupation. West German authorities took note and asked him to liaison with the newly revived here when West German rearmament began. His efforts would be integral to facilitating coordination and cooperation with between many armed forces. In time, he would receive a commendation from France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, and the United States. He would accept them each in turn, but not without a hint of irony. Alright. Back to the officers. Other officers such as Captain Boston. Captain Boston perished. Captain Rogers survived the war. Lieutenant Pratt survived the war. Lieutenant Barnum survived the war. Let's do Captain Boston. Captain Boston perished during an attack upon Cisterna while leading his men. Known for his valor and courage, his body would be located by Graves registration in 1944, exhumed and reburied within the bounds of the Sicily-Rome graveyard near Anzio. His surviving men would make many pilgrimages over the years to visit him and remember. Captain Rogers. Captain Rogers was usually pleased with the relatively few casualties the Nickel Company suffered following her safety brief. She made particular note of it for her superiors. Such things might be understandable, but good research also needed to be provable. The Nobel Committee would agree when it cited her efforts alongside others while issuing the 1952 Prize Award for Medicine. One thing she was certain of is that she had an ally in the company captain. That was a rare and valuable thing in this world, and she treasured it so. I don't remember Lieutenants Pratt or Barnum, so I'm going to skip them, because I don't think they're in our... I am going to click them, and if they're in our story, I'll just blitz right by them. Okay, this doesn't have anything for me. Barnum? Oh, the MP, that's right. The guy who came while we were hanging out with the mafiosi. Sergeant and later Lieutenant Barnum's career with the military police began with the theft of gold coins meant to pay off mafia members at Palermo, and only became more interesting from there on out. In particular, he recalled allowing an Italian combatant hiding in the men's family home to stay free, in return for gaining an informant. That it had been an inspired suggestion from an infantry captain didn't diminish the fact that it had paid dividends later. Barnum would be promoted and eventually serve as an interim commander of Spandau Prison. Following his retirement at the mandatory 25 years, he tried to get Hollywood interested in his life story. The studios turned it down. They found it to be just too outrageous. That was good for one hell of a laugh. Return to the epilogue hub. Enlisted Soldiers epilogue. Moving to the Enlisted Soldiers epilogue, heading to the Enlisted epilogue. Alright, we got some placeholder text here. First Sergeant Grant. First Sergeant Jack Grant survived the war. He still had his health, which was something of a surprise after all he'd been through. But heck, he'd take that. Returning to civilian life held no appeal, but a military career did, at least for a while. He often thought about his old captain. That's when he started planning the reunions, a chance for the men to get back together and remember all they'd been through. There was nothing like camaraderie found amid the privation of war. As for the officers, they'd be invited too. After all, they'd suffered alongside them, and moreover, had also borne the burden of command. Crossley, Roberts, Morris, and Patterson. Corporal Crossley survived the war. Corporal Morris survived the war. Sergeant Crossley survived the war. PFC Roberts survived the war. The passing of PFC Patterson. PFC Patterson perished in combat and would, by prior request, be buried beside his friend. When word reached home in Kentucky, the wailing was fierce. That year, his family and friends threw a 3-day bash to commemorate the golden son who'd gone overseas to seek his fortune but had never returned home. We gotta go to Morris after that. PFC Morris mustered out and went south to visit with PFC Patterson's family. He stayed on for a while to help them through the tough time and slowly came to appreciate rural life. Eventually, he'd relocate to settle in. In time, he would marry and raise a family. His first son bears the name John in honor of his fallen friend. PFC Roberts. PFC Donald Roberts survived years of war and only got shot once. A much liked soldier, his first lieutenant thought he'd make a true soldier. That did turn out to be true. Upon his return home, Roberts reunited with his wife, and together they worked their farm, raised good kids, and made their own patch of Eden. Sergeant Crossley. Sergeant Crossley crossed the Siegfried Line. A much-liked leader, he liked to tell replacements about how his lieutenant had recovered his Browning automatic rifle from falling into the sea. It had been an inspiring moment that reminded him that they would not order something they would not do themselves. He would return home, work hard, marry his high school sweetheart, and raise happy kids. Alright, let's go back to the epilogue hub. There were more enlisted epilogues. Right. Leighton, Miss Magrina, etc. Sergeant Leighton survived the war. Miss Magrina survived the war. Corporal Sparks Sobieski survived the war. Corporal J.J. Jackson survived the war. Sergeant Leighton. Staff Sergeant Harold Leighton spent his war cooking for 100 men at a time. After he mustered out, he used his accumulated pay to open his own beachfront restaurant. Every day he'd go in and prepare to cook a myriad of seafood and steaks, plate after delicious plate. Leftovers went home with his servers or to a nearby shelter. If he could help it, no one would go hungry. That was a motto he kept close to his heart for all of his days. Miss Magrina. Miss Violetta Magrina's war was fought with pencil and paper. Her accounts of the war were of the soldiers fighting for the people back home, so long as she did her part to keep morale up, offer an interesting account, and be truthful in doing so. The army would have been satisfied with just the first 2 of the 3. After the war, she was free to write stories that had been censored, those shocking tales from the front. The resulting book didn't sell well, given the glut of war stories in print, but every few years her publisher would reprint a few thousand copies intended for distribution to soldiers going overseas. Those always sold out. She kept in touch with many of the soldiers she met during the war. Their letters never ceased to flow, and she became a lifelong pen pals with several. Corporal Sobieski. Her writings extend to other books, stage plays, novellas, and even a stab at Hollywood, the screenplay called Command and Burden. Sadly, it was redeveloped into 2 separate films. The first became a pseudo-Roman epic entitled The Chains of Janos, the second a science fiction piece called The Temples of Mars. Both were quickly forgotten. Corporal Sobieski. Corporal Sparks Sobieski never figured out why he kept getting shocked whenever he touched his radio. Instead, he just accepted it and kept working. His captain needed him. After the war, he returned to his family in Chicago and was feted as a hero. He never thought that. He never thought that, though he did know quite a few of them in the platoons. He married and took a job assembling radios, and he was damn good at it. Eventually, he had submitted a number of patents involving workarounds for missing or damaged parts, and the revenue from that let him and his children truly enjoy the American dream. Corporal Jackson. Corporal J.J. Jackson was a little surprised to find that he had survived the war. Certainly the Germans, Italians, and even the French had tried their best to make that otherwise. Once he'd settled in back home, he began training for the Olympics. Though he didn't make the relay team, Barney Ewell and Lorenzo Wright wished him luck in the marathon. He wouldn't earn a medal. The competition in that grueling event was just too great, but he did quip, "I've won every race in my life up until now, and losing this time won't kill me." Let's go back to the epilogue hub. To the enlisted epilogue, is that everyone? The fortunate and otherwise. Not every story ends neatly or well. Private Hancock. The first combat casualty. Private William J. Hancock was the first casualty of Nickel Company's invasion of Morocco. The future commander of the company would stay with him until the end. Hancock would be cited in the initial dispatches for his heroic action. Upon hearing of his son's death, his mother collapsed. Tex and the Maid in Rome. Tex decided not to marry Mia immediately. Instead, he went on to fight out the war as best he could. When it was over, he returned to Rome but never found her. In time, he drifted back to Texas, found someone to love him, and settled down to live an ordinary life with sad memories of the extraordinary. I don't remember this character. What happened to the fascist De Bono? Colonel De Bono will be tried for war crimes and executed by firing squad at war's end in 1945. Yeah, get fucked, son. Asshole. This and other convictions would be a point of contention by the Togliatti administration prior to a more general amnesty. Return to the epilogue hub. Nickel Company's epilogue. The leadership of Nickel Company was never really in doubt, and the men responded to this with a will born out of a repeated victory. Casualties were few and invariably necessary. Those who returned home could not but praise their officers and toast them heartily in reunions. What did the men think of their captain? The men called the captain, well, Captain, not because they lacked imagination, but because the nickname fit really well. That acid tongue, always to the point and talkative to a fault, their captain had been with them since the beginning, since Captain Lamb, and they would not have traded that for the world. And on the battlefield, they never backed down, even when things looked bad. Everyone had a story about them, and when they were finally shipped home, they would share those tales with friends and family. List our memorable battles. Nickel Company participated in many battles. While officers might dryly cite them in after-action reports, the soldiers remember them all too well. Morocco, where our feet were first wet. After the lieutenant retrieved Corporal Crosley's Browning automatic rifle before it became lost to the sea, the run into the shore proved surprisingly uneventful, despite the danger of hidden reefs. Soon afterward, the lieutenant led First Squad on a successful attack on a French MG position on Red Beach. There they would find that PFC Hancock had tried to take the position and died while striving. Hancock would be the first casualty of Nickel Company's war. Thankfully, he would be the only fatality upon the sand. Recall the approach to the Hotel Miramar. The 2nd Platoon headed for the town of Fadala in order to secure the Hotel Miramar and the German Armistice Commission representatives that had rooms there. After a chat with the local named Abdullah, there was a fortuitous meeting with 2nd Platoon. Lieutenant Wilson was added to the battle roster for the effort, and the march on Fadala resumed. The raid on the Hotel Miramar. Speed was essential, and the raid quickly seized key members of the German Armistice Commission. These were held onto despite a friendly fire incident. American cruisers operating with the invasion fleet opened up with a pre-planned bombardment of the town. The men emerged largely unscathed from this. Cape Fadala, where the shells flew. The fortified emplacements along the cape north and west of Fadala would be the next target. Plans were made to link up with recently landed tanks. The operation was a stunning success, and the French immediately ceased fire. Casualties were within expectations given the dangerous nature of the attack. Long was the road to Casablanca. The next day, Nickel Company was at last assembled in full. With machine guns and mortars in support, an attack was made down the road toward Casablanca. The road was secured and the flanks cleared. This was the best performance out of 3rd Battalion that day. During the fight, a herd of horses was noted. There were hardly any casualties sustained amid the drive. This was largely attributed to the desire of the French to avoid this fight, whether from practical or political reasons mattered little. Casablanca, where the French lived. It was here that Nickel Company suffered its most terrible loss when Captain Lamb was shot and killed during a walk to Battalion HQ. It could not be undone by covering. The American sentry who killed Lamb was subject to a court-martial, but that would not bring the company's captain back any more than it would bring back Sergeant Bennett. Not the promotion anyone asked for. Despite the tragedy, Nickel Company performed with excellence, if not élan. The enemy barracks was secured. The French would seek an armistice the next day. The fighting in Morocco would end on 11th November 1942. The men of Nickel Company were glad for it and considered themselves veterans. Sicily, where the Italians waited. It would be 6 months until the 7th saw action again. This time they would be invading Sicily. The officer who would ask for a job of executive officer on the eve of a different invasion would now run Nickel Company. Things got off to a rocky start, literally, when the Navy landed them on the wrong beach at the base of a series of tall cliffs. Fortunately, their battalion commander had supplied them with ladders just in case this sort of thing happened. And Nickel Company did more than just get over the cliffs. They moved inland and cut the main road well ahead of schedule, despite their initial landing spot. The cost of the invasion was surprisingly light. Supposedly, the Italians had thought it unlikely for the Allies to land infantry at the cliffs. After all, this was arguably the worst invasion location. During the course of the battle, Nickel Company secured the first of many trophies in Sicily, a Breda 30, Italy's light machine gun. For a time, it would be paired with a captured Italian anti-tank gun, 2 lethal weapons secured by the men of the 7th side by side. It would have done well with the Italian anti-tank gun, but it certainly never fit on a desk. Palma di Montichiaro in hard fighting, Palma di Montichiaro where Wilson died. To pick the second one. Palma di Montichiaro is just another Sicilian town. Then the black shirts killed Wilson. The men wanted blood, but the captain cut it short. In the end, the black shirts were driven out double quick. As a reward, Nickel would spend the night under those roofs. I have to say on this one, I whinged about this one a lot. But ultimately, I think I see it, looking back, I think I don't regret not letting the men get their vengeance. I think ultimately the objective of war is not to kill, the objective of war is to win. And you can't be butchers. That's not what we're about. San Fratello, where the Germans were. Near San Fratello, Nickel Company would encounter the German army for the first time. In particular, they would position their machine guns in occupied farmhouses to deter bombardment. The battle was a fierce one, but the Germans were forced to retreat instead of staging a mere withdrawal. Casualties were kept down, mostly. Not as much down as I would have liked. Largely thanks to effective leadership. $1 Million Ridge, where it's all uphill. The Germans dug in again. Another amphibious end run was made to get them, and the relief of this beachhead required an assault across a river and up a ridge. Lieutenant Sturm would lead the initial reconnaissance that night. Some 81mm mortars would assist in the coming attack. The next morning, the 7th Infantry Regiment moved against the ridgeline. The assault began. The ridge was stormed and a bombardment suffered. When the counterattack brewed up, Nickel withdrew back down the slopes and made the Germans pay for every moment they took. The defenders of the beachhead would be relieved by other units not long thereafter. Casualties were astonishingly light, largely thanks to effective tactics, a few donkeys, and deft leadership. American artillery would go on to pummel the remaining German positions atop the ridge. Soldiers reckoned that must have cost $1 million. Thus, the battle for $1 Million Ridge ended. Not my best performance, but we're coming up on my worst. I think it might have made sense to stay and defend, but I didn't know. I didn't know about the campaign structure, and you know, I roleplayed it, right? Like, my company was all beat up, so I pulled back. It is what it is. Italy, where the Volturno flows. The Cottonbalers did not fight long in Italy, but the crossing of the Volturno River certainly made up for it. A great deal of equipment was lost when a boat overturned, but not the bazookas. Mount Majula would be climbed by Nickel Company, and then back down again after the German counterattack demanded it. Fortunately, support from across the river halted the enemy before a rout could occur. Casualties were astonishingly light given the enemy's armor. The bazookas played their part. Yeah, I bailed out of that one. But, you know, I was going to fight 6 Tiger tanks, or however many there were supposed to be. Anzio, the cautious invasion. Another invasion, this time at a sleepy little place called Anzio, just short of Rome. But Nickel Company would not move very far inland until days later. The target was the town of Cisterna. This time they would be coming to the relief of the Rangers. The Rangers would sneak through enemy lines and take the town. The Cottonbalers would then attack and relieve them. But things did not go according to plan. The Germans were waiting. The Rangers were overrun. A scattered platoon tried to break out, but the situation was impossible. Nickel Company could not reach them, and their captain chose to withdraw rather than risk everything. Losses were rather light, especially compared to the loss of the Rangers. Again, it felt pretty bad. My last real mission, anything other than victory in the campaign. Anzio, where what about the Baron and his duck? There was a soldier who was clearly not cut out for war. The former vaudeville performer had found a duck and wanted to keep it safe. The captain resolved the issue and the war resumed. I remember meeting the guy. The pilot. The war settled into trench fighting day and night. Then one morning an American plane crashed in no man's land. Nickel Company managed the rescue of the pilot and just in time. The losses for the operation were thankfully very few. Anzio when the Germans attacked. One morning the Germans attacked with Nebelwerfers and a Tiger tank in the fore. Nickel Company beat back the attack and sent the enemy running for their trenches. The losses that day were thankfully very few. What about that Tiger tank? The Tiger tank had broken down in the midst of no man's land, and in the middle of the night the Germans sent engineers to tow it out. A patrol was sent out to investigate, but contact was deemed too risky over a Tiger that was already disabled. The Tiger tank would remain in the battlefield until the next day, when well-spotted artillery would blow the turret off and leave it a twisted hulk. No casualties would be recorded for that difficult night. Anzio, when our tanks dug in. Okay, here we go. I've been waiting on this. I'm still hoping to figure out who was on that telephone. But that wasn't the end of dealing with tanks. Some wit at Division had the idea of digging in several Shermans to provide fire support. Since there were problems digging in at night, they ordered the digging to be done during the day. The captain refused to do it, but the tanks came forward anyway. Both tanks were maneuvered into position, and brave soldiers from Nickel Company dug them in. Then German artillery convinced the armor to retreat. The losses from the doomed effort were thankfully very few, given what was not ultimately accomplished. Cisterna, where revenge waited. Months of muddy warfare followed. A big Anzio Annie shell landed near Nickel Company. An attempt was made to recover the shell, and the engineers performed well. A push to break out from the beachhead began in May. During a lull in the shooting, an old foe returned. But De Bono's cunning plan was cut short, particularly when PFC Morris captured him. A field execution might have followed, but the captain kept a steady grip on the situation. Patterson would recover, De Bono would survive until his trial, when he was hanged to death in 1945. Get fucked. Asshole. The army threw everything it had into the offensive. The center of Cisterna was seized, and not long afterward, and resistance folded up not long afterward. American losses were very light, and almost pleasantly so. There was still more fighting ahead on the march to Rome. Rome, where garrison waited. The Germans pulled back. The Allies rolled into Rome. The 7th, and especially Nickel Company, was given orders to go into garrison. After 3 days, the entire regiment relocated the entire 7th to the Borghese Gardens. Tempers were high, but ice cream helped cool things off, or rather, Italian gelato crafted with army ingredients on the sly. Meanwhile, it was a chance for many to see Rome. Vatican City was but a little walk away. Naturally, the Pope would say a Mass. Many Allied soldiers were Catholics and wished to go. Those without critical duties scheduled got the morning off to do so, even though it wasn't even Sunday. That day, Pope Pius XII would bless 250,000 Italians and servicemen. It was easy to lose oneself in Rome, but after only 8 days in Rome, it was time to leave. Only 8 days. The regiment was not content with their officers. Not only had the worst gaffes been avoided, but the men still remembered how to march and pay. Regiment was content with their officers. Not only had the worst gaffes been avoided, but the men still remembered how to march, and paperwork had been filed, if not finished. The men of Nickel Company enjoyed their time in Rome. Down through the years, they would relate stories about their 8 days in garrison. They would, of course, skip a few details for the sake of children and mixed company. Focus on the looming battles in France. Rome had become a memory as preparations were laid for yet another invasion. This time they would go ashore at the sunny beaches of southern France. That's the French Riviera, I think. Churchill himself waved to them from his boat to their ship. Even so, everything felt rather rushed, and heavy casualties awaited on the beach. But the inland advance was steady, and there was no counterattack that night. However, the Germans did try to make a standing at Lalande. They really wanted to loot the place. The Germans were quickly pushed out, and their ill-gotten loot was left behind. It was during this period the Nickel Company adopted a stance on looting. Anything was fair game. After all, the men had been through a lot. Losses from the battle itself were very light, and the Nickel Company moved on the next day. Is that what I did? Nah, it's only stuff. Montelimar, when the artillery thundered. The Germans kept retreating all the way up the Rhone Valley, but the Cottonbalers swung in and tried to block their retreat. An enormous railway gun was sighted on the tracks that ran parallel to the road. The Germans never stood a chance. Losses from the battle itself were very light, and Nickel Company continued the pursuit until after the road had been cleared. I got so greedy in this battle. It ended up paying off, but oh my god, did I get the greediest it's ever been. Villers-Lure, when the champagne ceased. The pursuit sputtered outside of Villers-Lure when Item Company took a beating in an ambush. Nickel Company would be called upon to relieve them and take the town, and the town was taken despite fierce German resistance. Losses were very light, however, and Nickel Company would resume the advance when the Germans fell back. Item Company, those ill-fated brothers-in-arms, lost their captain and most of their officers. They would go into reserves to rebuild their strength. A battle that a lot of people have had a really hard time with, that I will say this. This was partially luck. I'm not going to take complete credit for double majoring this one. Like, I got lucky. I moved up into the woods. I caught the enemy counterattack with their pants down. That was just a massacre, and then I just moved into the town from the side they couldn't see. Like, it was smart choosing to attack that way. Like, that made the city fighting a lot easier. But the fact that that's where the counterattack showed up and I caught them in the open was pure dumb luck. So, you know, a little bit of this, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I'm still going to claim credit for it. Lucky commanders are a big part. Luck is the thing you look for in your commanders. I remember hearing that somewhere. But also, you know, how do you get a place without getting shot? You get there without getting seen, and that's the route I took. The Vosges of the Green Hell. The pursuit ended definitively in the thicker wooded mountains of the Vosges. Day after day through the entirety of October, both sides fought at brutally close ranges. The fighting to take the crossroads at Le Haut-Jacques promised to be more of the same, but Nickel Company dug deep and pushed through. Le Haut-Jacques, when the bell tolled. Losses were blessedly light. In the morning, Nickel Company would continue the advance. However, during the night, the Germans would burn down the town of Saint-Dié. Civilians were pushed onto the roads, and the Cottonbalers would eventually seek to help them, even though it slowed down their progress. After all, the Germans weren't going anywhere fast. Colmar, when it got very cold. The Germans would continue to retreat until they were back across the Rhine. That left the city of Strasbourg open for the French army to reclaim, but this liberation proved rather difficult. When a mob of angry civilians tried to punish a woman for collaboration, the captain intervened. This might not be America, but they were still bound by the military laws of conduct. And when liberation had been played out, it was time to move south towards Colmar. Oh, that was a stressful moment. Not my Would have liked to be able to act differently, but again, this is still a computer game and not a tabletop role-playing game. Then there were the Germans. Nickel Company moved across pristine white fields. Patterson had the lead scout when everything went to hell. He would not survive the day. The Germans hadn't intended to spring an ambush, but it developed like one. Nickel Company fought hard and turned the tide. The back of the German defenses would be broken. Losses were astonishingly light, considering the brutal winter. If it had been on Christmas, they would have called it a miracle. The white teeth of the Siegfried Line. Nickel Company made contact with the Siegfried Line to contend. This was supposed to be Germany's absolute barrier against attack. Nickel Company went through it like a hot knife through civilian butter. Multiple bunkers were taken. I've heard tell that if you don't do this one fast enough, German armor can potentially show up, but I did it, so. I will admit I was a little cavalier about having our friendly company take hits, but it all worked out. The price. The captain spoke briefly to a die-hard German officer who was fully committed to the Nazi cause. Losses were astonishingly light, given the depths of the defenses. The men considered themselves charmed, and the war continued on. Even with the Rhine crossed and the Siegfried Line penetrated, the Germans did not give up, not yet. Augsburg and the end. Nickel Company would cross the Rhine in their last amphibious invasion of the war. Though they rolled through Germany, Sporadic events, sporadic fights, and once tidy little towns blurred. Eventually they came to the former imperial city of Augsburg. Nickel Company handily swept through the town and, with a local resistance guide, took the surrender of the command bunker. Losses were heavier than anyone wanted, especially at this stage of the war. Yeah, not my best generalship. Never did manage to successfully deal with the Tiger tank in this game, I will say that much. Dachau. There have been rumors. Then there was Dachau, a crime against humanity. The Cottonbalers saw it all. They smelled death up close, they heard the flies buzz. They felt the gaze of the emaciated survivors upon them. Stern bore witness to it. He also spoke to the survivors. No words. Move on to the Bergtesgaten. The war in Europe was less than a week away when the Cottonbalers rushed across Germany. There were still holdouts and resistance, but the town of Bergtesgaten was thankfully undefended. They climbed the slopes. They took Hitler's Berghof, drank Goering's wine, and seized the only military buildings of note. It was not the end, but it was at least an ending. Return to Nickel Company. Nickel Company was more than just participants in a series of battles. Recall Nickel Company again. The leadership of Nickel Company was never really in doubt, and the men responded to this with a will born out of repeated victory. Casualties were few and invariably necessary. Those who returned home could not but praise their officers and toast them heartily at reunions. Return to the epilogue hub. My journey is at an end. This is it. Thanks for playing, and remember, when one story ends, another begins. Aux vaillants combattants de la 3e division des États-Unis, libérateurs du canton, de 36 10-11 44, en mémoire de leur éminent mérite et sacrifice, dans ceux des Cottonbalers, 148 tués, 8022 blessés du 7e régiment d'infanterie. Go to this screen. I've still got all these casualties listed, which is not ideal. I took a lot of hits at Augsburg I didn't realistically need to take, but, you know, that is what it is. I don't have any replacements, but I can make the rounds. I shouldn't, though. This is the end of the campaign. I can't do anything about this. I will end up taking a screen grab of this eventually for the devs. So, how did things go? I took a lot of realism, so I ultimately didn't end up with all that much combat fatigue. Um, Thompson got a hell of a lot of combat fatigue. Rao was moderate. He ultimately got a decent amount of trust and XP. I wasn't good at optimizing his trust and XP gain. Dearborn I was better about. He also got a lot of combat fatigue. Stern ended up very little trust, but Stern doesn't lead assaults, so that is what it is. Ended up with 53 loyalty and 83 prestige, which is not bad. Not bad at all. Combat fatigue was moderate amongst these squads, I will say. It is what it is. But I was conscientious about using the prestige I got to make sure that their combat fatigue didn't get too bad. So I will make the rounds. Spend 1 point of loyalty on that. And we'll continue our journey. I'm not sure. I think this will just be the credits. So let's see them. Well. Yeah, let's do the credits. This is the entire credits. I'm not going to read all of this. Okay, no, we got a bunch of things over here. I'm not going to read all of this. I'm just going to spend a few minutes on each screen while I talk about the game. So Burden of Command, I think, is kind of a rare breed. The only thing I really have to liken it to is a Legionary's life. It's a real interesting animal. I definitely recommend you play it. I've had a great time with it. This is definitely the sort of game that I wish there was more of available. Burden of Command is really a game that brings out the humanity of war, and I think that's really important because I think it's very easy when you're in a strategy game context to view the thing as entirely sort of numbers and pieces on a board, and so I really appreciate a game that says no, we're talking about people here. That asks you to make decisions about people, because ultimately the soldiers that fight for you, they're all human beings, and at the end of the game they'll have lives to go back to, hopefully, and there's a lot to. I'm not being very articulate here. What am I trying to say? There's a human element to war that gets ignored in a lot of games, and I'm really pleased to see games that are coming out that really acknowledge that and really work to capture that both ludically and narratively. I really appreciate that we're starting to get a breed of game that's a mix of war game and role-playing game. I really like that. I've run for 2 years. I ran a hack of Band of Blades that was very much built around that idea, and I had just a hell of a time with it. I thought it was great, and this Burden of Command really reminds me of that. It's something I've tried to kind of capture in the role-playing games that I've run as well. Yeah, and I really liked it. I think Burden of Command is I would call it a flawed masterpiece. It started very buggy, and it's still buggy. There are things that are buggy. There are things that are not communicated as well as I would like, but the ambition was enormous, and there's something to be said for that. Frankly, like, I think when a game sets out to do something really extraordinary, like, there are a lot of ways in which particularly when you're a small team, you're reach can exceed your grasp, but I think there's a value in projects like that. In trying to do something enormous and huge and complicated and difficult and ambitious, and to make something great, and to recognize that like people will appreciate it, and that the ways in which it fails and the ways in which it is jagged, hopefully, in the best cases, will become part of its charm. I come to my way of looking at video games from through the way basically the super best friends look at video games. Is like there are a lot of things, there are a lot of times that a video game doesn't act the way it's supposed to, and that's part of the medium, and you take you and that's what gives games their personality. Games that are completely smooth and never sort of offer any kind of weirdness are games that have very little to remember. And when you take a game, you take it with its flaws. And Burden of Command, despite its flaws, is, I think, a masterpiece. I really loved playing through it. I had a great time with it. I've encouraged many people to try it, and I will encourage all you to try it. With that having been said, that is definitely all the time we have. This episode sprawled way, way, way out. But this is the final episode of Burden of Command. If you got all the way to this point, I really appreciate you. Throw a like in there. Throw me a subscription if you're having fun with it. I've had a great time. I hope you all have had a great time as well. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you on the other side.